Welcome to Media That Made Us, the podcast about the stories and art that help form us into who we become. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and I'm joined this week by Quill Turner, aka Polyamorous Q, game designer, voice actor, all-around nice guy, for a conversation about tabletop RPGs, actual plays, and the stories they create. So, join us, won't you? We're so far from the world of, you know, your job ending in an ER and like being a thing that people could recognize, you know, like
right. Yeah, you couldn't, you know, if this were the 1200s, I don't think I would get by with my name being Quill Analyst. That's not going to fly.
Yeah, we did luck out that was
yeah.
Everybody got their names back when it was easy, you know, and you could be
Yep.
So, if someone was to ask who is Quill, what do you hope the answer is?
Well, that's a good question. First and foremost, the person who doesn't suck. Secondly, a gigantic nerd is basically the easiest way to say that.
Okay.
Yeah, I do my best to be a kind person who people like to talk to, and also I like things. I'm a fan of a lot of things, which is kind of the best way to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny to me how, I mean, we all know where the negative implication from the words like nerds comes from, but like when you break it down to its most simple definition, it's that you are somebody defined by your own enthusiasm, which, like, come on, like that is like at its heart such a positive thing to be, you know, like it's such a wonderful like aspect, you know.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest nerds on the planet are people who are really into the NFL. Like,
oh yeah. Like, although I don't know, I've talked to some baseball people, and
no, you're right. Baseball people, yeah, no, you're right. You win. You're right.
Their math goes super deep.
Right. Yes, because they get to be both sports guys and math guys at the same time, and guys non-gendered.
Yeah. Guys in the general.
Yes.
So, like, what sort of kid were you?
So, as a kid, I was I mean, this will shock you, I was a big nerd. I did not go outside much. When I was little, my parents had me in all, like, the sports. I did YMCA basketball and T-ball and, soccer and all that stuff, and I was terrible at all of it. Just the worst. Absolutely no skill when it comes to sports, which, now a thing that I have come to realize as an adult is, like, I'm 6'1". Like, I'm currently 220 pounds. Like, I'm a big dude. Yeah. Which is a thing that I never felt like until very recently, because I have no physical, like, acumen in sports or never did martial arts or anything like that. And so the fact that I could be, like, physically intimidating was like a revelation for me that was fairly recent. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, back to the question. As a kid, yes, big nerd, didn't go outside much. I read so much. I was one of those kids who would, like, go through a novel in a single day. In elementary school, I briefly set the school record for a number of accelerated reader points, which I don't know if that was a thing for other folks, but basically it's you read a lot of books. Yeah.
God, did you run out and they make you write the tests?
I think I might have written tests for a couple books that didn't have I had forgotten that, but I'm pretty sure I did that now that you say it.
You and me.
Yeah.
Right there with you. That's great. And I'm assuming, like any kid who's a voracious reader, it's like kids don't have taste, you know? You just pick up whatever's in front of you. So it's like that wide mixture of reading, like a combination of just trash, right? Like stuff that just existed and it was in front of you, so of course you read it.
Right. And, versus, I remember none of it, right?
Right. Yeah. Or you read it and it turns out that by happenstance you picked up, something that was seminal out of nowhere or whatever. Or or accidentally you pick up a classic book because you think it was the novelization of a movie that you liked, and it turns out that it was actually just an independently good book, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of, for me, I think a lot of it was like my parents picking stuff out for me at the library or Barnes and Noble, or what was at the school library. I was a little weird as a kid in terms of my stuff because it was all fiction, right? I was never into nonfiction, which is normal. But I also didn't like Goosebumps. I didn't like Captain Underpants. Like that kind of thing was never my vibe. And like no shade on that stuff. It just wasn't for me. Yeah. Just a lot of sort of more classic fantasy, or in elementary school when it was stuff like the school reading was books like The Key and that one about the plane crashing and the guy surviving in the winter in the wilderness for Hatchet. Yes, that one, like that stuff. And so I read more stuff on that sense where it's fictional but about like a theoretically real circumstance, right?
Yeah. Well, like it sounds like you weren't necessarily aiming for, or weren't necessarily perusing mostly like the kids section. You're like just kind of hitting broadly for like the more just literature at large.
Yeah. Especially once I got into middle school and definitely in high school, it was always fantasy and science fiction. Yeah. At that point, I still do not. When I get into my I want to escape mode, I want to escape. I don't want any of my entertainment to feel like it could really happen.
Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting.
So it's fantasy and science fiction. It's to some extent like superhero adjacent stuff, though again, I've never read a comic book.
Oh, really?
Which seems like it'd be right up my alley, but it just never came into my path.
I'm curious. So it's just for lack of opportunity, or did you try and get turned off, or?
It's just lack of opportunity. Like I'm sure there was a comic shop somewhere in my area, but you know, I lived in the suburbs in a city, and so I couldn't walk to a place. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I was happy with just like textbooks, right? Yeah. Not textbooks, books made of text.
Paper books.
Right.
Or
paper books.
Prose.
Yeah, there we go. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've heard a lot of people talk about the people who pick up comics versus don't is always an interesting dichotomy. To me, it was always about like getting completely thrown off by the massive continuous world problem of modern American comics, where like you can't,
everything has to be connected.
And if you at all have that sort of completionist mindset where you're like, I want to read the whole thing. Like I have to have the context. I need to do it. Then like, you know, picking up Spider-Man 151 or whatever, and then realizing that you've missed decades worth of backstory can be particularly intimidating for kids.
Yeah, I suspect if I had started comic books when I was young, like in elementary school, it wouldn't have been a problem. Because I read a bunch of Animorphs books, and I'm very certain I read them out of order. Right? Like, chance did I read those from 1 to however many there are, even though I think I probably read all of them or close to it.
Sure.
I can't imagine I did it in numerical order. But certainly at this point, getting into comic books would just be such a monumental. It's just never going to happen, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I have a fair bit of knowledge, but it's like what I pick up from like cultural osmosis, basically, and obviously like the MCU and stuff, and video games, and all the sort of side projects that come from comic books.
Yeah, well, and like it's really interesting because big worlds like that are like idea generators or like character generators. Like they're these massive things that like in a lot of ways like the original property is less useful than all of the sub properties that come out of it. You know, all of the TV shows, all of the movies where they can pare out all of this junk that doesn't matter anymore and get to like a certain subset of it. Right. But I will have to back you up because I want to hear a little bit about your love of Animorphs. This is one of the ones that fascinates me.
Well, it's interesting because I remember really liking it as a kid.
Yeah.
But I remember so little about it actually.
Sure. Okay.
If you were like, especially like a year or two ago, before a couple, like there was a Tumblr post I read recently that was like, here's every Animorphs book and the really terrible traumatic thing that happened in every single one of them. And I was like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah. This is what I've heard.
Yeah. So I don't remember any of that, basically.
Yeah.
Like I have a like I know what the core idea is. 5 teenagers, they like stumble upon an alien artifact that gives them the ability to turn into animals, and they find out that they have to fight off these alien invaders that are worms that crawl into your ear and control people's brains. Cool. Then they meet an alien who is from this species that originally transformed and stuff, and that's kind of it. I remember the alien really likes Cinnabon.
Yeah.
One of the kids turns into a hawk and stays that way.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I've picked up by osmosis. It's one of those series that like so completely missed me that whenever I hit somebody who's like who read all of them, I'm always interested to hear their perspective, because experiencing Animorphs secondhand by osmosis from the culture is really wild, because you see stuff like that Tumblr post where it's like, here's all the war crimes that were committed during the course of this series, and you're like, okay.
Yep. Yeah, dude. No, Applegate did not fuck around with those books. Like, it's one of those. It's the thing. Like, that is the example for me.
Yeah.
More than anything else, it's like, hey, kids can handle it.
Oh yeah.
Like, if it's in a story and not like really happening to them, kids can take it, and they can like internalize like the lessons there, right? Because like, do I remember specifically what happened in Animorphs in every book? Would I be able to sit down and like write a critical statement about like, oh, Animorphs and its anti-war, anti-colonialism stances or whatever?
Sure.
No. Did it stick with me that like, hey, you should like not treat people as part of like huge, not treat people as though they are, not treat groups of people as though they are representative of everyone in that group, and that like, hey, war is bad. Yeah. Also, yes. Yeah. Right. Granted, helped along by the fact that my parents were not big on war.
Yeah. It's. I think that it's so easy as an adult to look back at children and be like, oh no, precious little cinnamon buds who must be protected from all of the deaths. But it's like, in fiction, fucking kids love that shit. Like in that context, that is they want, like, they crave that sort of darkness, in a lot of ways. I remember that as a kid, and I've seen that in my nibblings and stuff as they've been growing up, where it's like, no, they can handle it. They're looking for it because that gives you the tools to process those things later in life. Like, it's a way to give you an exposure to it without it being real, a safe way to do it.
No, like, I have kids. I'm a parent, and like, I watched She-Ra, the new one, with my oldest, who's 7 now, but she watched it first when she was 5, I think. You know what I mean? Like, and She-Ra is definitely a modern cartoon. And it has modern sensibilities in that sense. But like, it's also definitely like, there's fighting and violence, and like, it's very explicitly about war.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah, for sure.
And also, like, she likes to watch Pokemon a lot, which that is not a non-violent show.
No.
Like,
even things that people like think of as being really clean. Like, I think Avatar is much, The Last Airbender is much darker than people give it credit for, because a lot of people first watched it when they were kids, and they don't really remember that like, it's all about war. Like, there are war crimes. Like, the principal conflict for the greatest the final climax is like, is it okay to commit murder in order to save other lives? And like, what does that mean if you're also a pacifist? And like, do your morals override like the good, the best outcome for the culture at large and other people? And it's like, that's some heavy crap. Like, that is heavy stuff.
We also watched that one with Acorn, the oldest, and she loves it. She loves it. She wanted to watch it over and over and over.
Oh yeah. It's really good. It's
really good.
I came to that one as an adult, and even coming in like without nostalgia, just coming in straight, being like,
no, same.
What is this? And you're like, oh no, this is like really good. Like it's better than it had any right to be, which is really great.
Especially given all of the production mess that I understand the later seasons of that show.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Cool. So when did you start watching actual play streams?
So I guess we're getting into the actual reason I'm here, which is not Animorphs actually.
It could have been.
It could have been. No, I don't remember enough about Animorphs. But so I started watching actual play streams with Critical Role. Shocker.
Oh yeah.
I know, gasp. But that was my entry point. I was. Well, okay. Actually, that's a lie. Now that I think about it, my first one would have been Titan's Grave.
Okay.
Which was an actual play that Geek and Sundry did, where Will Wheaton was the GM.
Okay.
And at that point, I got into it because I was watching his board game show on YouTube.
Yeah.
That I forget the name of. That
I think it's just called Tabletop.
Yes, I think it is. Yeah, and that's been like a decade ago now or something. Jesus Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was watching that, and then he talked about that. That must have been where I got into Titan's Grave, and so I watched that, and so I was tuned into sort of like the Geek and Sundry online space.
Yeah.
And they had just kicked up their Twitch channel. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they did was Critical Role, which was this, to me at least, new concept of like, all right, we're going to live stream, not this recorded thing that Titan's Grave was. Yeah. We're going to live stream this actual play of this group of people, this group of voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons, which I'm sure most of the people listening to this are familiar with Critical Role, so I don't need to go into the whole conceit necessarily. And if you don't know what that is, it's not hard to find.
If you don't know what that is and you're listening to this podcast, who the fuck are you? Please tweet at me, because how the hell?
Right. How'd you miss that? Yeah. And so I actually jumped in on Critical Role on like episode 3 of the first campaign. Like when I could be in the Geek and Sundry Twitch chat and have actual conversations in the Twitch chat.
Yeah. Before it's just a wall of text going by at 1 billion miles an hour. Yeah.
Now it's not, no chance, right? And like, so I was like early on the thing. And so I that was my thing for a long time. I watched all of the first campaign and a solid chunk of the second campaign before I finally was like, I don't have time to watch 4 hours of Twitch.
It is such an investment.
That starts at 10 p.m. my time on a Thursday.
Yeah.
That was, especially once I had kids, it was just like, I can't do that anymore. And then at that point, when I fell off of it, I had started branching out away from Critical Role into other actual plays. I started listening to Protean City Comics. I started listening to, well, I guess really the other one that I started listening to was what I'm here to talk about, which is Friends at the Table. That is, and I had some friends who were listening to that and talked about it a lot, and I was intrigued. I wanted to learn more about other systems, other TTRPG systems besides D&D, because at this point I had started playing and GMing D&D and had been doing that for a while and enjoyed it, liked it a lot, but wanted to branch out and experiment, especially as I started to like stick my fingers into designing and hacking stuff, and I was like, I want to design a game. Yeah, maybe I should learn about other games first.
I don't know. You don't have to.
No, but I look back at the game, like the full game. I was like, I'm going to design this game. And then I did a solid chunk of design on it. And I was like, I bet someone else has already done this. I should look at other games. Lo and behold, I was right.
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar, give me the 10,000 foot view of what, Friends at the Table is, like, or at least where you came in on it, the part you want to talk about.
Yeah, so Friends at the Table broadly, it's an actual play podcast, not a live stream. It's a podcast only, and it's a edited, though fairly lightly edited, basically Austin Walker and several other people playing tabletop role-playing games. Yeah. And I say games plural, and I mean it, because every season pretty much is a different game, and often they will do more than one game in a given season. And so specifically the thing that I wanted to talk about here is their second season, which is called Counterweight. This is a science fiction sort of series that's, if you're familiar with mecha anime, it's highly, highly inspired by mecha anime, like Gundam and Evangelion and weirdly, I actually haven't watched a ton of mecha anime. Big O, I know, comes up a lot as as a reference point in that series. Yeah. So that's what Friends at the Table broadly and Counterweight specifically are.
Okay. And what was it that drew you into Counterweight specifically? Like, what is it that captured your...
So I wanted something science fiction.
Yeah.
I hadn't encountered a science fiction actual play at that point. Everything was sword and sorcery. Right?
Yeah.
It was Critical Role and the Adventure Zone Balance, right, were sort of the big ones that I was watching or listening to.
And there was a time in the tabletop space where the only systems that existed was D&D, and then like the werewolf / vampire series. White Wolf, is that the name of the company? I forget.
That's the publisher.
Yeah,
now.
the publisher. But they had a whole correction of it where it's like like your only choice. There was, not that they didn't exist, but in the popular consciousness of the average,
it was D&D, or it was Vampire, or then it was Pathfinder, which is like D&D but moves slightly to the right. Yeah.
Oh, Pathfinder is the people. Pathfinder is the ones who, like, when D&D stopped trying to be quite so. I don't even know what the word is, but they're like, oh, we are delving too far down the path of people of we're only going to have like 4 people playing if we keep going down this path because everything's too much. It's too, all of the numbers getting too big. It's too rigid. Let's try to cordon it off and take a new approach. And Pathfinder is the people who said, fuck you. No, let's do it the way you've been doing it this whole time.
The weird thing is with Pathfinder, it came as a reaction to 4th edition D&D, which I've never played, I've never read, but my understanding is that like it's a tactics game. Like, it's not like they went that far off of numbers. Well, it's just different kind of numbers.
But it eschewed traditionality in a way that the people who loved Pathfinder didn't want. Like, they wanted something that they followed a linear path starting with 1st edition D&D and went forward from there. Whereas 4th was definitely a departure, and so that's really what threw people. Also, 4th edition was better at being. I think it felt like it was a video game. Like, it felt like it was trying to be a video game, and it would have been better as a video game in ways that I think that some other systems definitely don't. Like, you couldn't turn a Powered by the Apocalypse system into a video game. Well, it wouldn't work.
You would think that, wouldn't you?
Oh, I do think that, but I'm interested to hear your. We can go back.
So it depends. Well, so depending on if you consider Forged in the Dark to be Powered by the Apocalypse, are you familiar with Citizen Sleeper?
Oh, no, yeah, I absolutely love it.
That is a Forged in the Dark game, period.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, that's how the dice work in that game, is it's Forged in the Dark.
Yeah. I think that you couldn't do masks, like a more traditional Power of the Apocalypse.
No.
There's too much lubrication of the storytelling to make all of that work.
It requires too much input as a GM person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So this was. Do you happen to remember the system, or did you already say what they were doing? They were playing.
So not yet. So the system for Counterweight, they start in a system called Mech Noir, which is technically like an expansion to Tech Noir.
Okay.
And so it's a cyberpunk noir.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's Blade Runner. Right. Yeah. And they sort of hacked with using the Mech Noir expansion. They put mecha into it. Right. Yeah. And then
now I see why Big O came up a lot, because that's very much the now I see.
Yeah. And then a couple of arcs in, they decide, okay, the system is not good radio, basically, and they switch to a system called the Sprawl, which I believe is a PBTA.
Okay.
Yes, it's definitely a PBTA.
Yeah,
yes, it is. And then inside of that, they, as is their wont, there's a couple of other systems that get played as sort of side games. There's a flashback that gets played in a game called Kingdom. There's a different flashback that gets played in a custom system that's made by Austin and Jack, one of the players, called The Tower. Yeah. The finale is played in a hack of Mobile Frame Zero Firebrands.
Awesome. I love the idea of using specifically. I've heard other people who'd like take a break from one game to do a little subplot or an episode or whatever in another system. But I love the idea of using flashbacks as a way to bring in other systems. That's lovely. I like that conceit.
That's a thing that the flashbacks thing that I think is used most successfully in Counterweight and it's like an in character flashback. I'm not going to go too deep on what exactly happens, but basically they get hooked up to a machine that lets them like hop into another character's memories.
Okay.
Right? And then they play out what exactly happens.
Okay, cool.
In that game.
Very interesting. And so what's the tone overall of you can go anywhere from super fun jokes, sort of jokey, everybody's nothing's ever taken seriously ever versus like the super serious grimdark. Where on the spectrum do you think it falls?
It's definitely not super serious grimdark, right? Like there's a major NPC that shows up later in the season whose name is Laser Ted.
Okay. Yeah. That says a lot.
So like there's plenty of goofs, right? But it's also it is a show that is there are big stakes in the show, and there is character death, and there is emotional stakes around that death, and big drama, I guess is the way I would put it, right?
Big drama or melodrama?
I don't know if it goes all the way to melodrama.
Sure.
Like it's not a telenovela, right? Like it doesn't go that hard mostly.
The only reason I ask is because like that's what mecha anime often is. It's basically just a telenovela but with mechs.
Yeah, I mean it's in that space, I guess. I think my definition of melodrama probably is maybe a little. It is maybe not accurate to the cultural conception of that term.
Sure.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something and I lost it.
Oh, sorry.
Oh well. No, you're good.
And so besides it being just a sci-fi story in a place where you'd expected to see fantasy, what kept you coming back to it? Why does it live in your memory?
It's okay. So I listened to the show for the first time in probably 2016, 2017, and I've re-listened to it 3 times since, including very recently, like in the last few months.
And for an AP podcast, that's not an insignificant time sink. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like it's 40 episodes or so that are all between an hour and 2 hours long. Yeah. Generally speaking. Right. Like that's not a short number of things, which granted most of my podcast listening is done while I'm driving or doing chores. Yeah. So it's not the same as sitting down and watching a TV show or reading a book, but it is still a lot of time. Yeah. And so it sticks in my brain. I keep coming back to it because, the thing that I tell people when I try to get them to listen to the show is that this is my favorite science fiction story ever in any medium. Okay. That includes like Star Wars. Yeah. And Ender's Game. Sure. Like... period. This is my favorite science fiction story. End of sentence. Okay. Right. And what's the sort of fictional premise? You said it was mecha, but like, is this what sort of started off noir? So is it at like a street level kind of conflict, or is it? So it starts that way, and then it escalates pretty quickly into a very much like the stakes of this are the end of the galaxy, or not literally the galaxy will blow up, but like the end of galactic civilization as we know it, right? So in terms of like, what would the Netflix description for the show be? Like, is it like 4 friends or blah blah blah, or right? This is 4 misfit mercenaries get sort of half accidentally sucked into a political conflict that eventually turns into, oh no, the biggest bad of all time has shown up, and you're the only people who can deal with it. Gotcha. Right. Gotcha. Yeah. Cool. Interesting. I'm curious. I'm very interested in the idea that this is your favorite sci-fi ever. How much of an allowance do you think it's being that opinion is affected by the fact that it wasn't pre-planned? Like, this is somewhat extemporaneously off the cuff. Things were generative during the story. I think a fair bit, right? Yeah. Like, part of the reason I like actual play podcasts so much is because of that extemporaneous aspect, right? Is because I love to see when you're presented with a problem and everybody goes, "Oh, what do we do?" And the answer is, "I know. I'm going to pretend I want to buy 24 robots, and oh my god, I accidentally just bought 24 robots." Right. right? Because that's how the dice roll sometimes, you know, and it's like, all right, we're just going to roll with that. And okay, I guess.
Yeah.
And like if they were to have sat down and be like, okay, we're going to be a writer's room and write this out and then turn it into a book, or if this ever, it won't, but if it ever did get adapted into like a TV show or whatever, right? Like I suspect there would be a lot of changes because
there have to be. You'd
get to edit things, right? Like
oh yeah. That's where all the writing really happens, is in the editing.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you're watching something like that, where it's, because of the conceit of the format, because it's an actual play, it's got dice involved. People are even showing on, you get some amount of dice rolls and rules and things like that, where you're seeing some of the mechanics of why things are happening. It does. Right. It definitely colors your perception of, when something happens, like the stakes are higher because that they weren't in control of the outcome, and stuff like that.
Right. And it makes it so that if something, if you had written something one way, you might be like, I don't know, that doesn't seem realistic. But if it's like, oh, that happened because they rolled a 1 on their, they had 3d6 to roll and they got 3 1s. Well, sometimes it goes that way, man.
Yeah. Or where they're even ignoring the, where it's actual rules or dice involved, but just watching the back and forth between two people writing the story, where somebody says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to come up with this. I'm going to try to do this thing. And the game master has to say, okay, how does the world respond to this? And from that, decision A leads to decision B, which leads to consequence C, which leads to thing. And then down the line, you're going, how the hell did we get here? But it all, it's all from the back and forth of collaborative storytelling like that.
100%. And that's all over the place in Counterweight. And I love that so much. It's constant. And it's, if anyone is familiar with Counterweight who's listening, it's Drobot Taylor. It's Arya asking Jackie on a date. It's, that's like Laser Ted, everything about Laser Ted always.
It's really interesting to me how actual play content, both live streams, podcasts, all of that, lives in this space in between people just telling other people about what happened to their game table and produced fiction, where they really, they by nature they sit in between them, whereas it's really difficult to write a season of anything. And there's a lot of pressure on it. It is comparatively easy to do a certain amount of collaborative storytelling off something like an AP. And because you're getting a little bit of leeway from the audience, because they know that you're working within the constraints of the tools, and because that, if they're familiar with the game system, they'll know some of the genre aspects that you're leaning into. So you get some leeway there. But if you go too far into just telling somebody about something that happened at your table, my experience with that is it's always like trying to tell somebody about your dreams. They're like, yeah, sure, man. Okay.
Well, the thing that helps there, right, with an AP is that you've listened from the beginning. Yeah. Part of that sounds like you're telling me something out of your dream, man, is the issue where someone's 20 sessions into this campaign and they're trying to be like, oh, this cool thing happened. Yeah. Oh, but as I'm trying to tell you, I'm realizing I need to tell you about this other thing, and that means I have to start with this other thing. Yeah. And it's, tabletop campaign stories are kind of inherently you had to be there kind of things, sure. Right? And so with an actual play, if you've been listening from the first session, you don't need that context. You already had it.
You were there. You didn't have to be there.
You were literally there.
Yeah, you were there. Yeah, and it's definitely interesting to see. Like I said, you also get a lot of benefit of rather than trying to come into a story or a setting or a group of characters where everything's already established. You get to watch all of those bricks get built. As much as a player or a DM will try to come in really prepped with all of these ideas, none of that really matters until you get to the table and you start actually playing. And everybody really starts from a very low place, but over time that will develop and get built upon and get built upon.
And that's the world building aspect of things is always so fascinating to me. I love that. Yeah. Like one of the things that they do that I find, I didn't listen to it on this most recent re-listen just because I was trying to beat them to the start of their next season, which is their fourth season that's going to be set in the same universe as Counterweight. But one of the things they do is they have a session 0 that's not technically on the feed. It's linked in the show notes to the first episode, which is character creation. But their session 0 is, we're going to do world building. We're going to, like, Austin, the GM, used the Stars Without Number. Oh, that's technically also a system they use in this game, by the way, and I'll explain that in a second. But he uses Stars Without Number to generate 100 planets.
Yeah.
And then he's like, all right, everybody, here's our map. We're going to take turns randomizing one of these 100 planets, and we're going to put it on the map somewhere, and then we're going to figure out what all these random things mean actually in our setting.
Yeah. Right? It's interesting. I would love to see. I love that kind of stuff, because when you allow for randomness, when you sort of gamify the collaboration like that, where you say, here's the structure by which we're going to make these decisions, rather than somebody just sitting down and writing everything out. You're allowing for that emergence of things that you weren't expecting, right? Like, it's that matter of, like, okay, the dice said this, so therefore that has to be true. And then the backfilling in of how do we justify that in the game world? Okay, why does this exist the way it does? Why is this planet here, and why does it look like that? Forces people to make decisions they wouldn't otherwise make, right?
Right.
Yeah, which is fantastic. It really leads to good stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And it especially in this kind of context where they're taking Stars Without Number, which is it's an older book that is like it's a science fiction tabletop role-playing game.
Is that the one where you can play the character generation in such a way that you die during character generation?
No, that's a different one.
Okay.
That's I don't remember which one it is. But no, I don't think it's that one.
Okay.
Stars Without Number is I have not played the game itself. I don't remember the rules, but it has an extremely in-depth random planet and system generation engine as part of the book that I have read, and I've actually messed around with randomly generating planets using it, and it's really cool. And there's dozens of different tags your planet can have about the culture and the weather and the and the how many people are on it and what the environment's like and that sort of thing. And so you get wild stuff where it's oh yeah, the atmosphere here is totally unbreathable, all the plant life is toxic, and also there are millions of people who live on this planet.
Yeah.
What? How? Figure it out. Good luck. Yeah.
In case anybody is yelling at their podcatcher right now, telling us what we have forgotten, the game that I was thinking of was Traveler.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I do love a life path character creation system. I do.
There is something really fun about just starting with dice and a bunch of tables and just seeing what happens.
Yes. The one, Star Trek Adventures, has a fantastic character generation, life path system specifically, yes.
Okay.
Where because it's grounded in the setting, it makes it a lot simpler.
Okay,
right? It's all right, you're in Star Trek, you're in Starfleet, right? Yeah. And so the thing you did was you went to Starfleet Academy.
Yeah.
What did you study? And then after you did that, what happened next? And so you get four things, and they all give you a few points or whatever, and then you come out and you're like, aha, I have a character, and I was in engineering, and now I'm so I wear the yellow uniform and all that stuff. So
that's cool. Yeah. I could see how a structured setting like that would really lend itself to that kind of to that generation. That's really cool.
I want to, one of these days I'll get around to it. One of my dozens of unfinished projects is a variant on a life path character creation system for Blades in the Dark.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right?
That'd be cool.
Yeah. And I was a good chunk of the way through doing a life path system for Dungeons and Dragons before I decided I'm not going to do anything else for Dungeons and Dragons anymore, actually.
Man, yeah, I don't blame you. That's the one where, despite my that's the only system my social circle still routinely plays. If I run a one shot for something, they'll all play it. But the only one that they're all going to get out of bed for and make plans D&D. For is D&D. And man, I can't do it anymore. Something about that system maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts. What it does for me is it brings out the worst possible version of me as a player. Like,
interesting.
I turn into the war gamer, right? Like, I can't play those games without looking for the exploits to min-max the character, to not tell the story, and that's not fun. It just isn't.
You're
fun.
playing to win.
Yeah, because the game. You
want to do a dungeon crawl.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because it's structured in such a way that there are right answers to a lot of the questions. You know, there's not. Yeah. It's not that there's only one right answer, but there are a bunch of right answers and there are a bunch of wrong answers. And picking the wrong answers reduces the fun in one direction. But what that means is that you don't get any of the actual, not any. It greatly reduces your ability to tell interesting stories and stuff.
Yes. So I mean, for me, that happens to a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that is like, okay, what kind of campaign are you playing in? What kind of session are you in, right? Because if it's like, cool, we're here to do, you know, the original, not Tomb of the Apocalypse. What's it called?
Tomb of Annihilation?
Tomb of Annihilation. There it is. I was close. That one, where it's like, hey, this is a dungeon crawl. You're going to die like 6 times in here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's all about, like, you better come in and have... Yes. Yeah, right. Where it's like, you got to min-max everything. Yeah. Use your 10-foot pole. Like, that sort of stuff, right? Like, that's not... I'm not always in the mood for that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I can appreciate it, and lots of people love that stuff, right?
There's nothing wrong with it. It just... I would rather play a game, if I'm going to do that, I'd rather play a game that is for that, you know, and to really go in with the assumptions, rather than trying to sit in the middle and claim that it's both, like kind of like D&D kind of does, where it's like, well, you know, you can totally play a game that's about intrigue and politics and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but you can, but you can also just play past the stick storytelling and do the same thing. It doesn't help you anything, as opposed to something like Masks, where the structure of a story is built into the rules of that system in a way that, like, you know, okay, yeah, you can technically kind of min-max some of your abilities, kind of, but like...
Right, but it's in service of the character, right? Yeah. Like, none of it makes you mechanically stronger, really.
Well, and like, really, if you try to min-max Masks, the thing that happens is that you become a paragon of the city faster.
Right,
you know?
and the other
you'll
thing
just speed run...
Oh my gosh, you're a really good superhero.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, there isn't, you're not going to become the level 20, you know, demigod that you would in D&D. You're just going to play the story out fast. So there's no reason, there's no incentive to do it. So don't do it. And you end up with a much more enjoyable experience.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're not like wrong though, right? Yeah. Like the other thing to do to min-max Masks is to play the Nova.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. Which, hey, that's the class. Yeah. That's what it's supposed to be. Right?
Oh yeah.
Like, it's just, you know, D&Ds are like, oh yeah, the 3 pillars of combat, exploration, and social, or whatever they call social. I forget, but like, where it's like, you got 1 pillar and 2 like dangly bits. Like, let's be real here.
One of these pillars takes up a lot more of the rest of the book than the other 2. And other, and then the next one is like the rest of the book, and then you have like a page for that last one.
Right. Which, like, again, that's fine, but like, be honest with yourself. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, like, no, lots of shade. Yeah. It's not that it exists that way that I would take issue with. It's the claiming not to be that way. Like, all of the people who say, well, you could do all this other stuff, and it's like, it's not helping you do it.
I have played sessions of D&D that are like, we're not fighting. Like, I played a whole one shot where the thing was like, you're gonna be at a fancy party trying to do this social stuff. There will be explicitly no combat. Yeah. You will not fight in this one shot. Like, and it was fun. Yeah. I enjoyed it. My character was cool, but also it would have been easier and better in a different system. Yeah. Like, it would have. Like,
yeah, exactly. You are contorting D&D to do something it's not really built to do, and then it's kind of fighting you to do that. And I'm very interested in telling those other kinds of stories at a tabletop. And so I'm very interested in systems that let you do that actually encourage you and help you and push you away from telling the dungeon crawler, I'm gonna kill every person I meet because they're just piles of XP.
They're XP loot, right? Yeah. It's like, if I want to grind, I'll go play Final Fantasy. Thank you.
Yeah. Which I'm sure there's some awful Final Fantasy tabletop RPG out there now. You've now that you mentioned that, I'm sure it's out there, and it must be.
Oh, my friend.
Yeah.
The game that I'm about to start running is called Icon. It's by the same person who made Lancer.
Okay.
And it is explicit. It's like explicitly a Final Fantasy RPG. Up to and including, there are separate playbooks for narrative mode and tactical mode. Because when you go into tactical mode, it is grid-based combat.
Oh, there's absolutely something beautiful about just leaning into it. You're like, nope.
Yes.
You're gonna go into the cut. You're gonna go into a battle mode, and you're gonna swap all your stuff out, and the characters are gonna look different.
You get the Pokemon battle music, and 100%. Yeah.
And now your little chibi guy suddenly is taller because they have more resources to deal with. Yeah, absolutely. I'm down. If you just lean into it, it's better.
That's 100% what it is. It's absolutely just like, this is a JRPG. Like.
Yeah, that's if you're gonna lean into it. That's all. That's great. So I'm curious about because you obviously love this series, and it sounds like you like their other stuff as well. But this one in particular, the Counterweight. I know you do game design on your own. You've already mentioned it. How did that affect your going forward? Like, did that influence the stuff you wanted to make, or?
Yes, but not like directly. I didn't suddenly be like, I want to make a mecha thing, right? Because it's more like it opened my eyes to like, what can a game look like? Because Counterweight was my first introduction to like systems that were explicitly emulating a genre. Yeah. Right? In the sense of like Tech Noir and Mech Noir and the Sprawl, where it's like, these are noir and cyberpunk games, and they are built from the mechanics up to lean into the genre, right? And then also to games like Kingdom, where it's not a traditional RPG. You're not rolling dice. You're not. You don't have stats. Right. It's instead this thing where it's like, all right, we're all just gonna like role play scenes as these characters, make decisions, and then there's some element of randomness to figure out how exactly they go, or we vote to figure out how it went, or whatever, right? Like, and it was like, role-playing games can be this whole other thing. Yeah. And that was brand new to me. Yeah. Right? Like, that was kind of mind-blowing at the time.
Yeah, that's great. Having that sort of third eye open moment where you're like, this thing that I thought was small is much bigger now.
Yes.
That's really great.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So, Counterweight specific to you, or do you feel like the rest of the Friends of the Table stuff holds up pretty well too, and that one just happens to be your favorite, or?
So I think pretty much all of Friends of the Table holds up pretty well, but it's all very different, right? Like, Counterweight is the one that I've re-listened to the most. It's probably been the thing, nothing else I've done am I like, this is my favorite of X in all of media, right? In the way that I feel about Counterweight, right? But I do think it's all good. Like, I could sit here and give you a ranking of every season in terms of which one I like best, but like that, do you want me to? Because I will. Like, it's one of those where it's so dependent on like what you're interested in and what, like in what your particular genre like interests are and stuff, right? Like,
so it's one of those things where, depending on what a new listener might be interested in, you'd say, oh, well, you like fantasy, therefore you should probably check out this, or you want I don't know, I don't know the thing, so I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's various other versions of romance. You should do this, or
right. Yeah. So the big things for what they put together is, if you want fantasy, if you want science fiction, and one other they've done is, do you want like gothic horror?
Okay. Yeah.
Or actually, they're just about to actually make free now. Do you want, God, how do you even describe Bluff City? Jesus Christ. Do you want an alternate history / alternate future version of Atlantic City that's deeply weird in every possible way you could interpret the word weird?
Okay. That's a hell of a pitch, man. Yeah.
Bluff City is good, and it's explicitly the first 2 seasons, and they're going to start the third one soon, which has been hinted will be different. But the first 2 seasons of Bluff City are explicitly every arc is a different game.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm curious. I'm always on the lookout for game mechanics that it sounds like they swap between systems pretty frequently. Have you seen them or anybody do sort of blending of mechanics where they're looking like, let's pick and choose. Oh, I want to grab this little bit from over here and use it to help me. Okay.
Yes. So I can give you a specific example of this that Friends of the Table has done. The season finale for Twilight Mirage, which is their fourth season overall and second season in the universe established in Counterweight.
Okay.
So it's science fiction, but like several thousand years further future than Counterweight. And it's basically like, we're in a magic science fiction utopia that's on the decline.
Okay.
Right? The end of that game is, what if we took the Quiet Year and then also Firebrands and smashed it together?
I love that.
Yeah.
Sounds rad. Okay. Since we've been ranging all over on the topic of TTRPGs, I have to ask for some recommendations for stuff that you think people haven't heard of that they should check out.
Stuff I think people haven't heard of. Well, okay, who's the audience here? Because like,
I don't know that the answer to that question, it says a lot about you, I guess. Whatever you think the answer is,
Because like, if I'm getting asked that from like my friend who's like, I've been thinking about trying D&D, I'd be like, okay, have you checked out? Maybe you should check out Icon, or maybe you should check out For the Queen, right? Which are there's some thing, or like, do you want to play a fantasy game actually? Because you seem like a science fiction person. Maybe do you want to play like Scum and Villainy instead, right? That sort of thing. In terms of like games that I think an audience that is more into the TTRPG sphere that might be less known, that's tough. I mean, actually, Icon, which I brought up a couple of times now. It's the same person who did Lancer, which is a pretty well-known game, I think, in the sphere at this point. And it's in beta right now, so it's free. You can get it for free.
And I think they're still using, or maybe he's more involved, but the guy who did the art for Lancer and also does Kill 6 Billion Demons is also doing stuff for Icon, and
that is correct. It's so
fucking
good,
beautiful.
It's
incredible.
God. Yeah. It's so good.
This is just me also recommending. If you haven't read Kill 6 Billion Demons, audience and Oracle, fucking go do it. It's on
my list.
It's such it is an investment, but because it's a web comics, man, they can drag on. But
what? No.
Yeah. But this one, at least so far, doesn't. It bangs on all cylinders the whole way through. And the art is fucking beautiful. I've never seen a writer who can name something as well as the guy who does Kill 6 Billion Demons. Like, the names in his universe are so fucking good. Like, 100% recommend.
I'm trying to think, because I'm frustrated because I know I have things I could mention here.
Sure.
That are just not coming to mind, and it's very annoying. Okay. Oh, here's one. I think this is probably something that people have heard of, but like, play Dialect. Go play Dialect.
Dialect.
It's so good.
Yeah, Dialect's really
good.
So
good.
It's
and then basically anything that's Forged in the Dark. Like, it's incredible. Beam Saber, Scum and Villainy. The Forged in the Dark system is incredible as far as I'm concerned. Like, no system is perfect. No game is perfect, right? No game can do everything that you wanted to, but it's pretty good.
And specifically the Forged in the Dark universe is so cool. Like, it's so full of like cool stuff.
The Blades in the Dark setting, you mean? Or?
Blades in the Dark settings. Excuse me. I had one of those. Like, the way they set that world up is beautiful. It contains so many setting elements that are just like, this would be, you mentioned this offhand, and it would be the central thing of any other setting,
Right.
Yeah.
Sex church. I mean, I saw, there's somebody, I forget who, I saw it on Twitter, who has done some Blades in the Dark supplements before, is working on a Forged in the Dark game that is set like 80 or 100 years after the, like, it's in the Blades in the Dark setting, but like 80 years or a century later, and so it's modeled on the actual 1960s.
Okay, rad.
And so it's like that very like mid-century science fiction sort
of atomic punk. But,
yes. Yeah.
But I have to imagine also the Italian Job. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like it's James Bond, but it's also Austin Powers, but it's also the Jetsons, right?
That sounds rad as hell.
Yeah, no, it's oh my, I hold on, I can go find this because I can't talk about this without.
Yeah, sure.
It is called Blazing 68. And it is by Old Dog Games.
Okay, cool. That sounds rad as hell. Yeah.
Yeah, they changed. So, like the original Blade setting, you're in the whole city of Duskfall is behind a lightning barrier to protect them from the ghosts outside. In Blades 68, the whole city is under a shiny bubble.
Yeah.
They have changed the name of what is formerly the Lost District to New Horizons. Right? Like yeah.
That's awesome. What about like a really good one-off or micro game or something like that?
Okay, so slam dunk right away, especially if you're playing with new people, play For the Queen. Oh my God, play For the Queen.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. It takes literally no setup time and no time to learn. Alex Roberts is a genius.
Oh yeah,
as far as I'm concerned.
Like, oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't done For the Queen, but freaking oh crap.
Starcrossed
is the best game I've ever played, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, like,
Starcrossed is great.
It's so good.
Yes, another one, great single session. You got to have the stomach for it. Both of these, I'm going to give you two. You got to have the stomach for it. First, 10 Candles.
Yeah. I've heard great things.
Horror game. That game is horror as shit. Like, be prepared to feel some fucking feelings.
Yeah.
Also, feelings. Alice is Missing. Absolutely bananas. They're making a movie out of that game, which I don't know how they're gonna do that, but that's wild.
Yeah, I saw a thing on that. I'm like, holy shit. Yeah, that's awesome.
And then also self promo. Yeah. You should check out Queer Heist Crew Multiverse Mashup by yours truly for a one session really good game. I have had multiple people tell me it is the game they use to introduce other people to tabletop games.
Awesome.
Which is wild to me, but I guess great. I can't not pull that one. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and then this is just my own self-indulgence here. All right. What would you want to play Breathing Space in? What system?
What do I want to play Breathing Space in? Okay. Yeah. That depends so heavily because the setting is so big that you can fit so many genres in it, as you can tell by the whole freaking show.
Yeah.
I mean, the obvious answer for me is a Forged in the Dark game.
Okay.
Right? Where you could be like... You could play a Forged in the Dark game as like the Carnival, right?
Oh yeah.
You know
That'd
what I mean?
Really cool.
Or something similar, or just as like a straight up bunch of smugglers, or as people as like union activists, right? Like that
would be very cool.
But because it's you, and also because it's me, I want to do something with the family specifically. Yeah, with the peregrination, right? And I'm like, what game? See, the thing is, I know that this was being worked on, and I think it might have fallen off the radar, but I think there was briefly talk of a dialect setting for the family.
I think somebody might have played a dialect game in the setting. I think it happened. I was not part of it. So it might have been they might have just been using our server to play their own like thing, but like I think that might have happened. Yeah. That would be really fucking cool.
Yes. Or like, I mean, something that would be interesting would be like, there must be somewhere, whether it's on Earth or somewhere on Mars or something, where things are just kind of like mostly fine.
Yeah.
Give me a wander home set in Breathing Space. Right?
Oh, yeah. Wander home
where like
really...
there are problems, but it's like problems you can solve like as a person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think that would be interesting. Right.
Yeah,
I think you'd have to find the right spot for it. Like maybe it's some orbital around Venus or whatever, right? I don't know.
Sure.
But like
flying city, it's they're floating cities on Venus is the lore on that one.
Yeah.
That would be cool. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me this evening, Quill. If people wanted to find you on the internet, where would they find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at polyamorous_Q, or my game design account on Twitter at Q_game_design.
Mm-hmm.
You can find my games at itch.io at quintessential-gaming.itch.io. And if you want to find all my other places, because I'm also on co-host and very occasionally Mastodon, you can find all my stuff at beacons.ai/polyamorous_Q.
Awesome.
Generally speaking, if you're looking for me, polyamorous_Q or some variant like with a dash instead.
And I know we already had the breathing space conversation, but I will specifically tell the audience to go check out Communication Delay.
Yes, thank you. Unspeakable Distance, specifically.
Yes,
Communication Delay is the game. Unspeakable Distance is the podcast.
Communication Delay is still what the folder is called in my Google Drive, which is why.
Yeah. Go listen to Unspeakable Distance. It's good and getting weird in a good way.
It's getting so weird. I have the...
Dude, your post the other day about the episode that hasn't dropped yet, I am so afraid of whatever you freaked out about.
It's fucking wild. I have the incredible luxury of being the first fan because I edit, quote unquote, edit the episodes, which means that people send me audio and I just listen to them to make sure that like nothing's really wrong and they didn't and then I just get to hear everything before everybody else and otherwise don't have to do any work. It's so good. And you guys are, it's fantastic.
It's really good. It's fun.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yes.
Unspeakable Distance. It is a actual play of Communication Delay by Audio Quinn. You can find it at unspeakable.scottpaladin.com. All right.
You got a website and everything. Fancy pants.
I didn't want to pay for a domain of its own, so it got a subdomain from my own.
That'll do.
Which is I wish if I'm going to give advice to any other podcasters, it's buy a single domain and put all your podcasts as subdomains. It'll save you so much money on domain names. I'm spending so much money on cowboy.fart.
Oh my god. Is that for Cowboy Classics?
Yeah, it's actually a cowboyf.art.
Oh, of course. Of course. A name that lots of people will definitely not get wrong.
When I found out it was available, I just had to fucking buy it, and I can't give it up
Cowboy.art.
Yeah. All right, bye.
Bye.
Well, that's it for this episode of Media That Made Us. Thanks again to Quill for coming along and joining me. If you want to go to the description of this episode, you should be able to find a place to buy his games, which you should definitely do because they're very good. While you're down there, maybe consider recommending this podcast to a friend or leaving a review, or maybe even heading over to patreon.com/cursedknowledge, throwing us a few dollars, because this has been a production of the Library of Cursed Knowledge.